Tensions have sharply escalated as the United States moves forward with a major military decision that could reshape the balance of power in the Middle East. Following the collapse of prolonged negotiations in Islamabad, US President Donald Trump has ordered the implementation of a naval blockade targeting Iran's maritime trade, signaling one of the most serious confrontations between the two nations in the recent history. The directive, confirmed by the United States Central Command, took effect on April 13, that is today at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Under this order, U.S. naval forces will enforce a blockade on all the vessels entering or leaving Iranian ports, regardless of their national origin. The enforcement zone includes key waterways such as the Arabian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, both of which are vital corridors for global energy transportation. However, in what officials describe as a calibrated approach, the United States has clarified that it will not interfere with ships merely transiting through the Strait of Hormuz, provided they are not docking at Iranian ports. And this high-stakes move follows the breakdown of 21-hour negotiations between American and Iranian delegations in Islamabad, marking one of the most significant diplomatic engagements between the two sides in the recent years. The U.S. delegation, led by Vice President J.D. Vance, presented what it described as a final and best offer, demanding strict guarantees that Iran would halt any pursuit of nuclear weapons. Key conditions reportedly included limits on uranium enrichment, dismantling of certain nuclear facilities, and a reduction in support for regional groups. Iran, however, rejected all these demands, accusing the United States of adopting a rigid and unrealistic stance, and ultimately walked away from the talks. In the hours that followed, President Donald Trump announced the blockade through a series of forceful public statements, making it clear that the United States intends to exert maximum pressure on Tehran. He also instructed U.S. naval forces to identify and intercept vessels in international waters that comply with what he described as illegal tolls imposed by Iran. The rhetoric quickly intensified with warnings of overwhelming retaliation against any Iranian action targeting U.S. or commercial shipping. Iran's response was swift and equally firm. Senior officials and military leadership warned that any foreign military presence near the Strait of Hormuz would be viewed as a direct provocation. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard signaled that it would respond decisively to any perceived violations, raising fears that the fragile ceasefire currently in place could soon unravel. Iranian leaders have also emphasized that they will not yield to external pressure, framing the blockade as an act of aggression rather than a defensive measure. And the situation carries enormous implications for the global economy, particularly in the energy sector. And the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical choke points in the world, with around 1/5 of global oil supplies passing through it each day. Even the threat of disruption has already triggered volatility in international markets. Oil prices surged above $100 per barrel, following the announcement, reflecting growing concerns about supply shortages and prolonged instability in the region. Brent crude, which had fluctuated significantly in recent weeks, continues to react sharply to each new development. And beyond the economic impact, the geopolitical stakes are equally high. And the Middle East is already experiencing heightened instability, with ongoing conflicts and military activity adding to the uncertainty. Reports of Israel operations in southern Lebanon and continued tensions involving regional groups further complicate the entire situation. Meanwhile, international actors, including European nations and other global powers, are calling for restraint and urging both the sides to return to the negotiating table. And despite the escalating rhetoric, some limited maritime activity has resumed in the region, suggesting that both the sides may still be attempting in order to avoid a complete breakdown. However, the margin for error remains extremely thin, and any miscalculation or unintended confrontation in such a heavily materialized environment could trigger a broader conflict with far-reaching consequences. And as the blockade begins, the world finds itself at a critical juncture. The United States appears determined to apply maximum strategic pressure, while Iran shows no signs of backing down. And with diplomacy stalled and military posturing intensifying, the coming days will be crucial in determining whether this crisis can be contained or whether it will spiral into a wider and more dangerous confrontation. That's all for now. Stay tuned to the Savera for more updates. Do like, comment and subscribe to the channel.